Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are completely tearing down this huge myth that getting rich is all about luck or just being in the right place at the right time or, inheriting some massive fortune. The research we're diving into reveals that wealth is actually built through highly intentional, totally predictable daily actions. What we've uncovered in the source material is essentially a practical, step-by-step tutorial for building wealth. So let's just dive right into the foundation of this whole blueprint. There is this absolutely fantastic quote from Bill Gates that perfectly captures the whole essence of our explainer today. He said, "You spend the first 30 years of your life forming habits, and the next 30 years, those habits form you." The source material really highlights that shifting away from typical middle-class assumptions doesn't start with some massive windfall of cash. It actually starts with rewiring your daily habits, literally right now. Based on the research, we've distilled this process down to 3 core steps for today's tutorial. First, we'll look at executing 100 times. Second, intentional learning. And third, we'll unpack what it really means to think win-win. All right, let's jump straight into step 1, the rule of 100. So, you see this massive divide between people who stay stuck and those who actually build wealth. The common middle-class mistake is expecting instant perfection. I mean, it's human nature, right? We all want fast money. When someone starts a new project, they kind of expect it to be an instant hit. And when the results are predictably terrible, because let's be honest, our very first attempts at literally anything usually are, they tell themselves it's impossible and they just quit. But self-made millionaires operate totally differently. They don't sit around waiting for perfection, they just execute. They commit to trying something 100 times before they even allow themselves to judge the results. Whether that's analyzing 100 stocks, hitting the gym for 100 days, or making 100 really awkward sales calls. Relying on fast results just leads to quitting, but committing to sheer volume, that leads to mastery. To really understand why so many people quit, we have to look at the psychology behind learning something new. It's this phenomenon playfully known as Mount Stupid. When you try anything new, say coding, business, fitness, investing, whatever, you pick up a tiny bit of knowledge right out of the gate. And that early learning gives you a massive, totally false sense of expertise. Your confidence and your motivation just absolutely spike. You feel like you're on top of the world. Or, well, on top of Mount Stupid. But then, reality sets in. The market fluctuates, customers reject your product, or your grand idea just doesn't quite fit. You realize success isn't actually that easy, and honestly, that is exactly when most people fall back and quit. So, going into step 1 of this tutorial, you've really got to manage your expectations. The wealthy know that the beginning of any journey is purely for data collection. Your first 10 to 25 attempts at anything are strictly for your brain to start spotting new patterns. You aren't supposed to be succeeding during these first 24 tries. You are supposed to be actively learning from failure. Which brings us to a legendary example of this exact mindset. Thomas Edison reportedly failed countless times before he finally invented the light bulb. But his perspective was entirely different from the average person's. He said he didn't fail, he just found thousands of ways that didn't work. Every single so-called failure was actually a required, necessary step toward eventual success. There's this fascinating university study that mathematically proves this whole concept. A class was divided into 2 groups to make clay pots. The single pot group was graded solely on making one absolutely perfect pot by the end of the year. The 100-pot group was graded strictly on quantity. Just make 100 pots and you get an A. So by the end of the year, which group actually produced the highest quality pot? The quantity group, no question. The perfectionist stayed completely stuck in theory, just paralyzed by planning. But the 100-pot group took massive action, improving by just 1% with every single messy attempt. Taking action beats perfectionism every single time. Let's move on to step 2, intentional learning. When Warren Buffett is asked about the secret to his extraordinary success, he very often points to one specific habit, reading 50 pages every day. But wait, it turns out millionaires do not just read random self-improvement novels to feel productive. They are highly, highly intentional. To actually apply this, you have to match your specific wealth goals with domain-specific knowledge. Think about it. If you just consume random information, you're going to get random results. If your goal is investing, your daily reading should be strictly focused on accounting, economics, psychology, and business. Or if your goal is starting a business, you need to be reading up on marketing, HR, sales, and distribution. To enter the top 1% of your field, your learning has to be surgically targeted to the exact domain you want to conquer. Actually, if you read Warren Buffett's biography, you'll uncover a story that perfectly captures how much the wealthy value specialized knowledge over immediate cash. Early in his career, Buffett literally asked his mentor, Benjamin Graham, if he could work for him completely for free. Why on earth would he do that? Because Graham possessed knowledge that was simply impossible to get anywhere else. Buffett prioritized specialized, targeted learning over a short-term salary.
Which brings us to our third and final step. Think win-win.
Look, the reality is there are generally two kinds of people. Some always put themselves first, and others actively look for win-win outcomes. This self-centered approach is exactly why 90% of people fail job interviews. They walk into a room with an internal monologue just asking, how much salary will they pay me? How many vacation days do I get? What are my benefits? This is a total win-lose mindset, entirely focused on extracting value rather than providing it.
Now compare that to the millionaire mindset shift. The absolute most important question you can ask is, what value can I create for the company? Here's a little secret for you. When interviewers ask about your hobbies, they don't actually care if you like to dance or listen to music or watch sports. They are secretly trying to figure out if your unique skills can help solve their company's problems. Wealth comes to those who realize that people don't pay you because you need money. They pay you because you solve a problem.
Let's look at how these mindsets play out over a whole career. The win-lose mindset does the absolute bare minimum required to just keep a salary. They don't update their skills, they don't add extra value, yet they constantly expect higher pay. But the win-win mindset, they ask, how can I deliver my absolute best output? How can I increase this company's revenue? When you focus heavily on creating real, undeniable value, it naturally forces the ecosystem to reward you, whether that comes in the form of promotions, a higher net worth, or huge sales commissions. Delivering a win-win outcome literally makes you indispensable. Let's see how this builds when you apply it at a massive scale. Think about legendary business leaders like Ratan Tata and Azim Premji. They built enormous wealth by designing their entire business models around these exact win-win principles. Their primary focus was always on making their customers better off and making their employees better off. They understood a fundamental truth of business. As long as the ecosystem you build is genuinely win-win, your own personal financial success is virtually guaranteed to follow.
Okay, let's wrap all this up with your daily action plan.
So here is your step-by-step tutorial summarized. Number 1, adopt a win-win mindset by constantly looking for problems to solve in your workplace or your market. Number 2, learn intentionally. Acquire the exact domain-specific knowledge that increases your value. And number 3, execute 100 times. Seriously, do not expect spectacular results in your first 100 days. A really great tip from the research is to pause after every 10 attempts just to measure your improvement factually. By the time you hit 100, you'll be making decisions based on hard data, not emotional frustration.
Which leaves us with one final and honestly very important question. What will you dedicate your next 100 days to? Because wealth isn't an accident, it's a blueprint. Pick your target, match it with intentional learning, and start your 100 days of action right now. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.